So my presentation is on John Bowlby. John Bowlby was a child psychologist born on February 26th in London, England in 1907. He grew up with an upper middle class family and a nursemaid and nanny. In his early life, he developed a passion in psychology tailored to developmental psychology. The framework of his research is centered on one single theory, attachment theory, in which he highlights the importance of bonding patterns and the effects displayed in children. He proposes other key concepts derived from attachment theory, including monotropy, maternal deprivation, and secure base. These core concepts further explain how relationship formation and child development and survival ultimately shape human development. So a little bit more about his attachment theory. Bowlby suggested that children's biological proneness to attach themselves to their primary caregivers in support of their survival aids in the understanding of human development. He believed that the close bond and attachment created between the infant and parent guarantees the needs of the child being met. Physical and emotional proximity are key determinants in whether the child's instinctive behaviors, such as crying and smiling, are displayed. He included 4 stages of attachment in his attachment theory: pre-attachment, attachment in the making, clear-cut attachment, and formation of a reciprocal relationship. Pre-attachment, in specific, begins from birth to 6 months, in which the child engages in behaviors such as crying and smiling to attract their caregivers. Attachment in the making begins from 6 weeks to 6 months, and this is where the infant begins to recognize and build a strong preference towards their caregiver. Clear-cut attachment begins from 6 months to 2 years, and the child at this point displays separation anxiety, and they begin to seek close proximity to their caregiver. Formation of a reciprocal relationship begins from 2 years and beyond their life, and this is where toddlers begin to develop a greater independence, but are likely to maintain the connection with their caregiver. Now, about the implications, a study by the American Psychological Association in 2013 evaluated the implications of attachment theory on health and disease and its impact on interventions and future research. It suggested that health psychology should consider dynamics in relationships, in other words, studying relationships in more depth. Interventions would benefit from the integration of duplex processes and attachment dynamics. They also suggested that both variables on an individual and partner level, when examining their implications on health and disease, is best to consider for future research. Another study evaluated the lack of research on the use of attachment theory in group therapy settings, can develop certain clinical implications. These include the ineffectiveness of group therapy for those experiencing greater attachment avoidance, as they are more sensitive to the group needs. In turn, pre-group preparation is recommended to develop self-regulation. It is suggested that they much rather benefit from group treatment targeting self-regulation and interpersonal needs. Now, talking about his key theoretical concepts, monotropy. Monotropy is the belief that an infant has an inherent obligation to attract themselves to one single figure, in this case their mother, for survival. This attachment is biologically explained and suggests it is essential for the primary attachment to occur, following secondary attachments such as the child's bond with other family members, including their father and siblings. Attachment is different from other relationships, as there exists a physical reciprocation among the mother's responsiveness to the child's signaling behaviors as their experiences are elevated. In his maternal deprivation hypothesis, which was formulated by monotropy, he suggested that the Disruption and long-term separation of the strong attachment developed in infants from their primary caregiver proposed detrimental emotional and behavioral impacts. He came up with this term for explaining this, which was affectionless psychopathy, suggesting the child will develop emotionless behaviors causing an inability to form connections. The separation during the infant's most critical period, which is the first 5 years, would cause irreversible effects such as heightened emotions, including aggression and deep sadness, and overall troublesome conduct among the child. His secure base concept focused on the primary caregiver providing security in an emotional sense to the child. At this stage, the mother's role is characterized as the secure base, given that she positively responds and supports the needs of the child. In return, the child is able to develop reliance and confidence, aiding in their healthy emotional development. Now, talking about the development of his theory, influenced by his milestones. Personal childhood separation. Bowlby experienced the tragic separation of his nursemaid in his early childhood. As this had a devastating effect on him, he began to view childhood separation as a crucial factor directly impacting a child's long-term life. He later developed an interest in studying the effects of attachment on child development. In 1914, at 7 years old, Bowlby was sent to boarding school, which he later characterized as a traumatic experience given his exposure to early separation from his mother and caregiver. Because of this, his experience was more detrimental than beneficial to his protection. In 1928, he picked up 6 months' worth of experience working directly with maladjusted children. Throughout his experience, he became more convinced of the importance of early developed relationships and their influence on the mental health of children. During this time at Trinity College, he learned about the manifestation of psychological effects through early developed relationships, leading to his interest in developmental psychology. In 1936, he continued working with maladjusted children and learning about the behaviors that children engage in. He observed delinquency and emotionless behaviors in children who perceived to be rejected, which influenced his maternal deprivation hypothesis, including the term affectionless psychopathy. In 1936, Bowlby's experience at the Institute of Psychoanalysis and his qualification as a psychoanalyst led him towards a less psychoanalytic approach, focusing more on the impact of real-life relationships on emotional experiences as explored in his research. Now, talking about the world events that influenced his theory, his attachment theory, was World War I, which began in 1914. At this time, his father was sent to combat in the war, causing the separation of his father to the family. This caused Bowlby trauma as he lost contact with his father, no longer being present. This event later sparked his interest in the study of psychology and development of attachment theory, focusing on child development as he began analyzing the importance in maintaining child-parent relationships. What also influenced his attachment theory was the Great Depression in 1929. The disruption of family dynamics and relationships as families separated in search for labor during the Great Depression strengthened Bowlby's research on the association between child neglect and the risk of experiencing psychological issues. World War II, beginning in 1939 to 1940, also influenced his attachment theory. He began as a lieutenant colonel, and he dealt with tragic war neurosis cases for the emergency medical services as a result of the war. These cases involved children who were forced to evacuate. He was influenced by his work in attachment and impact of prolonged separation, as he observed firsthand how children and families were separated. His work also involved analyzing theft displayed in children, where he discovered children engaging in theft experienced heightened family separations. This, in turn, influenced his work in explaining the significance of healthy attachment for child emotional regulation, and ultimately the 44 Juvenile Thieves publication in 1944. The Cold War era in 1950 influenced his attachment theory. He became a deputy director of the Tavistock Clinic and a mental health consultant of the World Health Organization. During this time as a consultant, he studied children in Europe who were left abandoned without homes as a result of the war, yielding the publication of Maternal Care and Mental Health in 1951. And that is all for my presentation. Thank you so much.